My friends convinced me I wasn't right for him, so I left. Now, months later, he doesn't want me back. I ended my relationship with my boyfriend because I thought I wasn't right for him. After I did that, he turned me down. It all started with my friends, as most things do. We were sitting around my kitchen table one night, half a bottle of wine down each, and the conversation turned to men. As it always does, they asked me how things were going with my boyfriend. I told them how things were going with him. He and I hesitated. It wasn't that things were bad exactly, but they weren't great either. We'd been together for over 2 years at that point, and we had our routines, comfortable but maybe too comfortable, if you know what I mean. He's nice, and I said, shrugging, but sometimes it feels like we're more like roommates than anything else. You know that moment when everyone looks at each other and you realize they've all been talking about you behind your back? That was this girl, one of my friends said, letting out a deep sigh. You could do so much better. He's not even in your league. I'm not usually one to buy into the whole out of his league nonsense, but they started piling on, reminding me about how I have a good job and I'm doing well for myself. I could be with someone who makes me feel appreciated every single day. The way they framed it, staying with him, started sounding like I was selling myself short. I mean, seriously, my other friend jumped in. You went through all of that drama with your ex and still came out of it stronger. You are smart, beautiful, and funny. Then there's him. He's just there to be fair. They weren't wrong. My boyfriend was a disaster. We were together for years and actually engaged. He decided he wasn't ready to get married because he was still figuring out who he was. I wasn't ready and it showed, so when things fell apart between us, it wasn't exactly a surprise. I guess he sort of held me back after I left university. I started to neglect my career because my ex paid for everything, and I didn't have to work after we broke up. I went back to school and got a master's, and eventually landed a good job. Then, 2 years ago, I met my boyfriend at a mutual friend's party. It was one of those random things where you go expecting to leave early but end up staying because somehow you. He was there with a group of his friends and we got talking. At first, I didn't think much of it. He seemed nice enough, but I wasn't looking to get into anything serious. One thing led to another, and before I knew it, we were spending more and more time together. He wasn't flashy or particularly ambitious, but he was steady and reliable. I felt like I could trust him from the start. Things were great. He was sweet, thoughtful, and never made me feel bad about myself. We moved in together after a year of dating and it just felt right. Looking back, I think it might have been too right. The thing is, as time went on, that spark I felt in the beginning started to fade. He was still a good guy and didn't do anything wrong, but something felt wrong. It was like I was settling, and even though my friends had their own lives to worry about, they were always quick to remind me of it. You don't have to stay with someone just because they're nice. That's what one of them said, swirling the last bit of wine in her glass. You deserve someone who lights a fire under you. That's how the seed was planted. They convinced me that I was better off without him. I needed to find someone who matched my energy and drive. They made it sound like staying with him was holding me back. So I did what they suggested. I sat him down one night and told him how I felt. I said I thought we had grown apart and that we wanted different things. I said I wasn't happy. He didn't. They convinced me that I was better off without him and that I needed to find someone who matched my energy and drive. They made it sound like staying with him was holding me back. So I did what they suggested and left. It wasn't dramatic or anything. I sat him down one night and told him how I felt. I said I thought we had grown apart and that we wanted different things. I wasn't happy, and he wasn't either. If he'd put up more of a fight, maybe I would have reconsidered. But instead he just nodded like he knew this was coming, and that was it. For the first few months I felt good about my decision. I went out more, started paying more attention to myself, threw myself into work, my friendships, and being the best version of me. My friends were really proud that I'd finally put myself first, but now, months later, I feel differently. I thought that leaving would make me feel more free, like I could finally go out and find someone who checked all the boxes. But the more time passes, the more I realize that maybe he wasn't the problem. Maybe I was expecting too much. Or maybe I was just listening to everyone else's opinions instead of my own. I recently reached out to him, thinking maybe we could patch things up. I didn't expect to get back together right away, but I thought we could at least talk. When I called, though, he didn't seem interested. He was polite but distant, like he'd already moved on while I was. I was still in the same position, and I was left wondering if I'd made a mistake after that phone call. Everything felt a little too real. I'd walked away thinking that I was in control and that I was making some big decisions for my future. But now, all of a sudden, the control I thought I had was gone. He wasn't chasing after me or calling to check in. I was okay. He wasn't doing anything, which messed with my head more than I expected. For the first few weeks after we broke up, I didn't even think about it. I mean, why would I? I was the one who left. I had made the choice and I felt confident about it, but slowly the confidence started to fade every time I scrolled through social media or hung out with friends. There were little moments that reminded me of him, things we used to do together, places we used to go, even songs we'd listen to on repeat. It's surprising how much you start noticing those things when you're not trying to. What hit me the hardest wasn't the memories or the reminders. It was the silence. You'd think that when you leave someone, there'd be some kind of dramatic fallout. It felt like a power struggle or an attempt to gain attention. In my case, there was none of that. He simply let me go, without any questions, drama, or fuss. As time went on, I started to wonder if I mattered as much to him as I thought, or if he was better off without me. That wasn't a thought I was prepared to deal with. I tried talking to my friends about it, of course, but they were the same friends who had told me to leave him in the first place. Who told me to leave him in the first place? Initially, they said I was better off just waiting until I met someone new. But when I kept mentioning him and asking if I'd made a mistake, their responses changed. You know, sometimes you just miss the routine. One friend, trying to be supportive, said, "It's not really him you miss, it's the comfort of." I was in a relationship that made sense on paper, and I tried to believe it. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just about the routine. It was about him. I missed his laugh, the way he would crack jokes when I was stressed, and the way he never made me feel like I was asking too much, even when I was the one asking. He wasn't perfect, but he was solid. Now it felt like I was realizing all of that. By the time I realized what I was doing, it was too late. I was feeling lost, so I did what any sensible person would do. I started dating. My friends encouraged me, saying that the best way to get over someone is to meet new people, have some fun, and explore. So I downloaded a couple of dating apps and tried to throw myself back out there. Let me tell you, dating after being in a long-term relationship is a whole new ballgame. Dating after a long-term relationship is a whole other ballgame. I suddenly found myself swiping through profiles of guys who couldn't string together a proper sentence, let alone hold a conversation. The few dates I went on were awkward at best and downright embarrassing at worst. One guy spent the entire time talking about his crypto. Investments were another one who disappeared halfway through the first drink. I wasn't looking for anything serious, but I wasn't prepared for how soul-sucking the whole process would feel. Every bad date just reminded me of what I had given up. I found myself comparing them to him, how he used to listen to me, I realized that actually making an effort was rare. The more I dated, the more I saw that. Then there was regret. I felt like I'd messed up something good because I let other people's opinions cloud my judgment. I kept replaying that conversation with my friends over and over in my head. What if I'd never let them get in my head like that? What if I'd focused on the good things in our relationship instead of nitpicking the things that weren't perfect? The more I thought about it, the more I started to get angry at myself, at my friends, and at the whole situation. I listened to everyone except the one person who mattered most, me. I let other people's opinions make me doubt something that was working just fine. We weren't setting the world on fire with passion, but we were happy, or at least I thought we were. That's when I started. I was trying to decide whether I should get in touch with him again. The more I thought about it, the more anxious I became. What if he'd moved on? What if he wasn't interested in hearing from me at all? After all, I was the one who left. I was the one who decided that he wasn't enough. The last thing I wanted was I was worried that I'd come across as desperate, or like I was only reaching out because I was lonely. But the idea kept coming back to me. I'd look at my phone a dozen times a day, debating whether or not to text him, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I was too scared of what his response might be, or, worse, that there wouldn't be one. I didn't get a reply, so I tried to focus on other things. I threw myself into work and did my best to move forward, but no matter what I did, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had walked away from something that mattered, something that I might never get back. One night after yet another awkward date that ended with me politely excusing myself to get some air, I found myself standing outside my apartment building with my phone in hand, staring at his name in my contacts. I hadn't spoken to him in a while. I hadn't spoken to him since that one polite, distant phone call, but something inside me snapped. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep pretending that I was fine, that I didn't care, that this was all just a bump in the road. I typed out a text. It was short and simple. Hey, how have you been? Nothing dramatic, nothing desperate, just an olive branch. But then, just as I was about to hit send, my phone buzzed. It wasn't him. It was one of my friends. I stared at the message from my friend for a while. I was just about to send him a text when I got a message from a friend. It was nothing major, just a meme and a quick "how are you," but it was enough to make me think twice. I put my phone down on the kitchen counter and walked away, needing some space I needed to take a step back and clear my head. I'd spent so much time dwelling on my feelings of regret and uncertainty, replaying every moment of our relationship and breakup like it was some kind of unsolvable puzzle. But what was I really doing here? I thought back to why I left in the first place. I had doubts and a nagging feeling that something was missing. It hadn't all been in my head. There were real reasons I walked away. Reasons that had nothing to do with what my friend said and everything to do with. I felt like I wasn't being fulfilled. The problem was that I didn't know if those reasons were still valid or if I was just looking at everything through the distorted lens of loneliness and nostalgia. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling thinking about him and the life I had walked away from. Was I missing him, or was I just missing the idea of him? Did I actually want to try again, or was I just scared of the unknown? As the hours dragged on, I realized that I had been putting off the one thing I needed to do, face the truth. Whatever that was, I couldn't keep living in this limbo, caught between what was and what could have been. I needed to decide once and for all whether I was going to move forward with my life or try and fix what I had broken. The next morning, I picked up my phone and reread the text I had written to him. It seemed small and silly now, just a text. I hadn't gone through something like this before. I deleted it. I needed to do it right, so I called him. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. I almost hung up, but just as I was about to, he answered. Hello? His voice sounded the same as it always had. For a second, I was thrown back to all the times we had talked late into the night, when everything between us had been easy and uncomplicated. But I wasn't calling for nostalgia. Hey, I said, my voice catching a little. It felt like an age before he replied. What's up? He said. I'm fine, thanks. I've been thinking about you and us and I just wanted to talk. There was another long pause. I could tell he was trying to work out what this was about. I've been thinking too, he finally said, his voice careful. But I don't know if talking is going to change anything. I felt a pit in my stomach. I hadn't been expecting him to be so quick to get back together, but hearing there was a hint of hesitation in his voice, and I could sense that the distance was hurting him more than I thought it would. I knew I'd left, and I was trying to get the words out before I lost my nerve. I'd said that things weren't working, but I'd been thinking a lot about everything, and I just missed him. I missed us. And now, standing at the edge of this moment, I was trying to figure out if there was any way to fix it. He didn't respond right away, and when he did, his voice he said he missed me too, but I don't know if that's enough anymore. I was disappointed. I hadn't expected this to be easy, but hearing him say that still felt like a punch to the gut. I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, "What do you mean?" I sat down, processing the impact of his words. I had been so focused on my own feelings and second-guessing that I hadn't even considered what this had done to him. I had walked away, leaving him to pick up the pieces of whatever we had, and now I was asking if he could just put them back together. I thought maybe we could try again. I said, my voice small, "I know I messed up, but I'm not saying it's impossible." He cut in, "But I'm different now this time. Apart, I realize things about myself too, about what I want. I don't know if I want to go back to what we had." Silence hung in the air between us, heavy and uncomfortable. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to fight for him, to beg him to give us another shot. But another part of me, the part that had been questioning everything, wondered if maybe he was right. Maybe we weren't supposed to go back. He said, "I don't want to hurt you," breaking the silence. But I think we both need to be honest with ourselves. Maybe we're not the same people we were when we started all this. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but I blinked them away. He was right, and I hated myself for that. Hi everyone. I thought I'd give you an update since a lot has happened since I last posted. After that phone call with him, I was pretty torn up for a while. His words stuck with me. Maybe we're not the same people we were when we started all this. At first it felt like he was. I was closing the door on everything and I didn't know how to process that. I had spent so long regretting my decision to leave, and to hear him say that he wasn't sure if going back was even an option, it messed me up. But over the next few weeks I started to realize that he was right. We had both changed, and it wasn't fair to either of us to try and force things back to how they used to be just because I was feeling lonely or nostalgic. I needed to figure out who I was outside. I still thought that breaking up with him was a mistake because we could have worked it out together and not just accept that we were different. I made the wrong decision, but I came to terms with it. It was time to get over it and accept that we wouldn't go back together, so I took a step back. I stopped reaching out to him and trying to fix things that maybe weren't meant to be fixed. It wasn't easy, though. There were days when I really wanted to text him or call him just to hear his voice or feel like we were still connected in some way. But every time I resisted the urge, I felt a little bit stronger and a little bit more like myself. During this time, I focused on my job and started spending more time doing things for me. I'd neglected these things while I was caught up in the relationship and all the fallout from the breakup. I also started running again, which used to be my go-to. To help me unwind before I got caught up in everything else, I signed up for a yoga class. I know it sounds a bit cliché, but it really did help. Most importantly, I started going to therapy. It's been a real game changer for me. I hadn't realized how much I had been carrying old baggage from my relationship with the first ex, from my breakup with my boyfriend, and even from my childhood. Unpacking all of that has been tough, but it's also been freeing. It made me realize that a lot of my feelings of regret weren't just about losing him. They were about losing the version of myself that I had been when we were together. Together, we had been holding on to this idea of what my life should look like instead of accepting what it actually was. A few months passed, and in that time, I started to feel more at peace with everything. I wasn't obsessing over him anymore, and I wasn't beating myself up over my choices. I was just getting on with my life, and it felt good. Then, out of the blue, he reached out to me. It wasn't anything dramatic, just a simple text asking how I was doing. I wasn't expecting to hear from him again, and I wasn't sure how to respond after all the work I had done. I had to decide whether I was ready to let him back in. Was this a step backward, or an opportunity to reconnect on different terms? I sat on the text for a while, unsure of what to say, but eventually I responded. We exchanged a few messages, catching up on what we'd been up to. It was nice, but it also felt different. There was no urgency, no expectation of anything more. It was just two people who had shared something important checking in on each other. A couple of days later, he asked if I wanted to grab coffee. I was hesitant at first. I didn't want to undo all the progress I had made. I made the decision to get back together with him, even though it wasn't the right move for me. But I felt like I owed it to myself to see where things stood between us, so I agreed. We met up at a little cafe, not far from where we used to live together. Walking in, I was nervous, unsure of what to expect. But when I saw him sitting there as he sipped his coffee, I noticed something had changed. He looked the same, but somehow different. He seemed calmer and more grounded, like he'd done some growing during our time apart. The conversation was easy and comfortable, even though we talked about work, life, and our friends. We laughed about some of the silly things we used to do when we were. We were together, but we didn't talk about us right away. It felt like we were both feeling things out and trying to see if there was anything left between us. Eventually, though, the topic came up, and he asked me how I was really doing and if I was happy. For the first time in a long time, I could honestly say that I told him about the work I'd been doing on myself and how I'd come to terms with a lot of the things that had been weighing me down. He listened, really listened, and it felt good to be heard. Then he shared his side. He told me how hard the breakup had been for him at first and how he had questioned everything, wondering if he'd thought maybe he'd done something wrong or that he could have fought harder to keep me. But over time, he realized that he needed the space too. He'd been in a rut, just coasting along, not really thinking about what he wanted or where he was going. The breakup had forced him to look at his life in a way he hadn't before. When we finished talking, we both agreed on one thing. We weren't the same people we were when we were together. And that was okay. In fact, it was probably a good thing. He told me he had a new girlfriend. Hearing that hurt a lot, but it was a natural process. I had to accept it. I wanted to cry when he said it, but I did my best to stay calm, but I don't know where we stand now. I'm not sure if we can be friends because I know I still have feelings for him. It's tough seeing someone you love move on without you. I guess I have to do the same. I've learned that I need to put myself first. I've realized that I need to focus on my own happiness before I can be with anyone else. I think he's on the same page. Maybe we'll find our way back to each other. Maybe we won't. Either way, I'm okay with it. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm in control of my own story. That's something I wouldn't trade for anything.